우리 원불교와 매우 가까우시면서도 많이 협조도 해주시고 또 먼 길을 마다하지 않고 오시는 우리 리베라토 바우티스타 목사님 또 대표님을 우리 이 자리로 모시도록 하겠습니다. 큰 박수.
I am very pleased to be with you this afternoon. I am very pleased indeed that we continue our relationship together as in fact I have been working with representatives of Won Buddhism in a number of years now, and even at this start I want to thank the Reverend Duyon Park and Mr. Tae-woo Kim and many others here, the leadership of your international affairs work. I have been requested to address a number of things, including the role of religion in international affairs and the role of religion in the implementation of sustainable development goals. I hope that I will be able to address key matters on these topics. I prepared a presentation with 6 parts. I am prepared to skip the last 2 if we run out of time. I promised the Reverend Duyon that I will email my speech and she can give to all of you a copy. Let me make my first assertion. We need today a deep sense of spirituality that can and must nurture justice, peace, and sustainability. For such a spirituality to be able to address this, at least these 3 issues, this spirituality must have a deep sense of the past, emerge and engage in its practice in the present, and creatively engaged in the imagination of the future, if not tomorrow. The 19th century Spanish philosopher by the name of Miguel de Unamuno once said, and I quote, "Our spiritual life is, in the last resort, no more than the effort of last remembrance to persevere, to become hope, to become the effort of our past to become future." I suggest then that the contemporary concern for spirituality, which is the rediscovery of the role of religions in the forging of a different future, comes from an assessment of the past, increasingly characterized by experiences of subjugation and colonialism, even of empire and kingdom building, which we know very well in Asia and in this land as an expression of occupation and division. And sadly, religion has either been instrumentalized for imperial, colonial, and occupational expansions, or at the very least, co-opted into silence. Such events that we know today and is called in international affairs as historic injustices, slavery, colonialism, genocide, and racism, now come to bear on the continuing impoverishment of the human spirit, precisely because of our complicity as human beings and our religions in the commission of these historic injustices. You will perhaps, some of you who are knowledgeable of the use of religion by politics, you will recall the use of the terms the Bible and the sword in the Christian tradition, the Bible and the sword, or the word and the sword in early 16th century European colonialism, or the Bible and the rifle, the use of the Bible and the rifle in the conquest of other peoples and nations.
많은
Christianity came to the Philippines by bringing the Bible and the sword. American occupation of the Philippines came with the Bible and the rifle. This is an example of how religion has been instrumentalized in advancing the subjugation and domination of peoples and other lands. And so when we look back at the past, we realize how impoverished, how poorer our spirituality is, because we find out how difficult it is to enter into an act of repentance for the injustices that our religions, especially the Christian religion in this case, in these very historic injustices. And even when we try to address these injustices, we also realize how deeply entrenched they are in our current history, that removing ourselves, extricating ourselves from their continued perpetuation is very difficult, if not unrealistic. And yet we know too well how necessary it is that their contemporary expressions must be dismantled, and we must repent from their continued existence. Here I am simply suggesting that religions today must reckon with their complicity in varying degrees to these historic injustices and their contemporary expressions today. Coming to terms with our complicity as religions to these injustices, may I suggest to you, is an activity for religions to be actively engaged together in. It is the same reason for which the United Nations in 1945 came together to address the same historic injustices. Those who imagined the United Nations knew the untold sorrow, indeed the horror and the terror brought by wars. The immediate imaginations was World War I and World War II and the genocide, and therefore they inscribed in the preamble of the Charter of the United Nations a very strong objective. That objective says, we will save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, from the terror and the horror of war. And yet we know that the United Nations has not stopped wars. In fact, since the creation of the United Nations, there are more wars conducted. You know too well that the Korean War has not really ended. It is only on a temporary halt because of the armistice agreement. In a couple of weeks, we will be reminded of the horror of the dropping of the bomb in Hiroshima. And yet, even with the United Nations today, we know that there are far more lethal and dangerous weapons, including weapons of mass destruction, that are produced by many countries in the world. Another objective that the United Nations inscribed in its charter is the reaffirmation of its faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, and in the equal rights of men and women of nations large and small, unquote. Such was a solemn objective that we know have deep religious roots. The notion of human rights and human dignity have deep religious roots. But we also know that religions have a contested history of affirming as well as denying the enjoyment of such life with dignity and rights. It is no wonder then that when the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was established in 1948, it was hailed as a document that inscribed principles under which human beings may no longer need religion to establish and achieve their highest aspirations. And perhaps there will no longer be need for religious leaders, a priest, a pastor, an imam, a monk, to intercede to the divine for such aspirations to become real. That's why when you read the history of the writing of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, in the 1940s, religious leaders were alarmed. Oh dear, they will no longer come to the synagogue, to the church, to the temple, because now they have human rights. The alarm, as stated, is as much an indictment of religion as it is equally a call to rescue religion from irrelevance on a matter that is at the core of religious beliefs, and a religious belief across religions, if I may say, that human beings are sacred beings whose lives are of infinite worth. May I then suggest that human rights advocacy is an area of engagement for religions to work together in. And in the other points that I will discuss, I will say that human rights and human dignity are at the core of the successful implementation of the Agenda 2030 of the United Nations, which includes the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. The experience of security, of peace, of sustainability, and of human rights fulfills humanity's well-being when they are enlarged in scope and application. Freedoms are enlarged when human rights are secured. Human rights are secured when human dignity defines the way we relate with one another in society and in our communities. Human security or people's security thrives when freedoms and human rights are protected. Peace is possible under conditions of sustainable development and social justice. Freedom, human rights, security, they are all co-equals. None is larger than the other. None is to be secured first before the other. One of the most loved Secretaries General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan, said this, and it's one of my favorite quotes from him. Human rights are the principles by which we create the sacred home for human dignity. That sanctity, which is the sanctity of human rights, I should say, the sanctity of human rights includes the freedom of religion or belief, which calls for, among others, the highest level of respect and tolerance for one's belief, including unbelief or non-belief. These are principles that we call the common good. And religions offer from their core certain foundational understandings of life and society that are not unlike the common public goods that we know in secular society. It is for these very reasons that religions, beliefs, and ethical cultures offer their participation and support of international values of human rights, human dignity, of peace and sustainable development. Non-governmental organizations representing religious bodies and are present at the United Nations see themselves as partners in bringing into the understanding of the international community those precepts, practices, and beliefs that engender and enhance the mandate of the United Nations. The United Methodist Office at the UN and many other religious bodies that have UN offices, because their work, our work, contribute to and inform the evolving body of international law, international ethics, and international justice. We embody dignity, we struggle for human rights, and we transact and negotiate our relations with each other influenced by religious beliefs. The preamble of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights refers to human dignity as the foundation of human rights. Human dignity is the foundation of human rights. Or to put another image, human dignity are the building blocks of human rights. Let me put another image. The German theologian by the name of Jürgen Moltmann said, human dignity is born with us. Human rights are the protections we give to what is born with us. Something that is foundational, which is human dignity, is to me something of deep spiritual character. Religions, I dare to say, if not all religions, understand human dignity as a gift from the divine. Human dignity is a gift from God, a gift from Buddha, a gift from Allah, a gift from Yahweh. The gift of human dignity is a gift from the very start, that from the very start, I should say, makes all of us full human beings, whole human beings, capable of self-realization and communal association. So human dignity is the gift of the divine. What's human rights then? Human rights are our gifts to ourselves. Human dignity is the divine's gift to human beings. Human rights are our gift to ourselves. And why? To protect the gift of the divine. So human rights are the protections we give to the gift of the divine. So we say, thank you, God, thank you, Allah, thank you, Buddha, for giving me human dignity. I promise you, every day I will protect that gift. So we protect human rights because they spring from, they come from the gift of the divine. Protect human dignity with human rights is an act of spirituality of the highest order. It is of the highest order because it is about the preservation of life and the ensuring that that life will flourish. But as you will see in my fourth point, human rights is a language, an idiom that refers to humans, and there's something problematic with that. In academic studies, it is called anthropocentric attention to human rights, the anthropocentrism. It always refers to the anthropos, to the body, to the human body. And why is that problematic? Because I may have human rights, but I'm in the middle of polluted environment. How can I enjoy my right to food when I'm smelling something bad, when everything around me is in decay? So human rights must also refer to the right of the earth and the cosmos. So the international community has been thinking about how to link rights, human rights, with environmental rights. So this is an effort to enlarge the idea of of the divine creation, which includes you and me and the rest of the created order, the ecological system that we call. Again, in its simplest and practical meaning, I would say I don't think I can enjoy my human rights if I am in an environment of pollution and decay. So we have a burden to affirm and protect, to affirm human dignity and protect human rights. One venue, of course, is the United Nations, which has the role of standard setting, of norm setting, of creating the treaties and conventions that protect human dignity. But I also say that religions are an important venue for creating those same standards and norms of influencing the international and national and local discourses so that religious beliefs at their best can inform the creation of such standards. So I assert and submit to you that work on human dignity and human rights, including environmental rights, must be at the core of interreligious dialogue and cooperation. The United Nations Agenda 2030 and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals are a bold and transformative agenda which evokes religious, theological, moral, and ethical implications, if not imperatives. If the SDGs are about, if I summarize the SDGs into a few words, it is about the ending of hunger and the eradication of poverty for all peoples and the protection of the planet from degradation. If the SDGs are about this, and if the SDGs are a universal project, our work, therefore, on these SDGs approximate, mirror, are very much like a divine call to protect the sacredness of human life from hunger and poverty, and it is also a spiritual mandate to reverence the earth and the entire cosmos. The 193 countries of the United Nations that approved the SDGs did not necessarily know that they were approving an agenda that has deep theological, moral, and ethical meaning, but religious groups like ours know that they deal with deep religious implications. The SDGs come from the United Nations in a resolution called Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable World. The first paragraph of the text of the resolution starts with a very bold assertion, and it says, the Agenda 2030 is a plan of action for people, planet, and prosperity. This sentence evokes political, economic, and social implications as much as theological, moral, and ethical imperatives. As you will see later, the ethical imperatives deal with a just, compassionate society. Those are deeply theological and moral values. The Agenda 2030 invites all countries and all stakeholders acting in collaborative partnership to implement the agenda. Listen to the succeeding sentence, which I hope you see is equally a political statement as well as a moral manifesto. This is what it says, and I quote, "We are resolved to free the human race from the tyranny of poverty and want, and to heal and secure our planet. That sentence could have been written by a government, or that sentence could have been written by a religious body. The sentence continues, and I quote, "We are determined to take the bold and transformative steps which are urgently needed to shift the world to a sustainable and resilient path." But they add another sentence which I think makes it even bolder. And the sentence says, "As we embark on this collective journey, we pledge that no one will be left behind." May I suggest that the SDGs are and can be a rallying cry for religions to work together for the elimination of hunger and the eradication of poverty in all its forms and manifestations. But even as we make it as a project for interreligious work, it can also provide a challenge, because the next paragraph from that place where I was reading you several quotes says the following: "The SDGs seek to realize the human rights of all and to achieve gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls." I hope you agree with me that in spite of the positive advances in our understanding of human rights and gender equality, religions have a long way to go in realizing that all human rights are women's rights, that all human rights are the rights of girls, not just men and boys. The SDGs are a site for bold and transformative action as long as we realize not just their universality, but also that the 17 goals cannot be achieved one apart from the other. Just so that we know what we're talking about, I have been talking about the SDGs, but you may not know the 17. Let me just do them very quickly in shortcut form.
Actually, we have an
SDG 1, no more poverty. That's how simple it is. SDG 2, no more hunger. SDG 3, that you and me deserve good health.
14페이지에 보시면 SDG가 있습니다.
Everyone, at the very least, every boy and girl must finish primary school and then on to higher learning. Number 5, gender equality. Number 6, you deserve clean water and a toilet. These are simple aspirations. Clean water and sanitation. So it's a very ambitious project because the United Nations, the governments, and NGOs like yours and mine said, can we please do this by 2030? So I have already elaborated on the two, people and the planet. But may I add one more critical principle in the relation between these two? And that is, a healthy environment and a people freed from hunger and poverty is the condition under which peoples fulfill their dignity and equality. So the Agenda 2030 has a big surprise. The first sentence of the agenda says it is about people, planet, and prosperity. And then at the end of the 5 paragraphs, it added 2 more. It added peace and partnership. 5 P's. People, planet, prosperity, peace, partnership. P, 5 P's. On prosperity, the Agenda 2030 speaks of the determination of the peoples of the world to ensure that all human beings can enjoy prosperous and fulfilling lives in harmony with nature. Fulfilling lives in harmony with nature. I hope I'm correct that we look and we owe to Buddhism the ideas and practice of the principle of harmony with nature. And then the agenda proceeds to say that the eradication of hunger and poverty and the hunger and poverty of people and the sustainability of the planet can only happen if we have peaceful and just and inclusive societies. And what does that mean? Peaceful, inclusive, and just societies. These are societies free from fear and violence. So the text of the agenda says there can be no sustainable development without peace and no peace without sustainable development. Central to the implementation of the SDGs, therefore, is the creation and presence of peace, justice, and inclusion in society. As a representative of a Christian organization and someone who is involved in what is called ecumenism, the ecumenical community, in its wrestling with politics and economics, has defined what it means not just about sustainable development, but sustainable communities. So the ecumenical community is saying, okay, you want sustainable development, but it should not be simply for economic growth. It should be for the flourishing and nurturing of lives that are peaceful and just. Peace as shalom in both the Hebrew, Jewish, and Christian understandings, and I'm sure there are the same expressions in other religions. Peace as shalom is the highest ethical expression of our yearning for peace. Security that is not anchored on peace with justice is, to me, security that peddles death instead of prospering life. There's another gift of God. There's another gift of the divine, the gift of peace. And this is how I end it. That aside from the gift of dignity, is God's gift of peace. So living life in peace and justice is the highest way we honor the divine. Peace and security mean nothing when they are not anchored in justice, on justice. Among many other things, that peace becomes vulnerable when they are taken over by militarism and militarization. Peace and security in the end is about our deepest understanding of human vulnerability. Let me give an illustration. Reverend Robert Edgar, a fellow United Methodist, said this: instead of exercising preemptive strike, we must practice preemptive love. The quote from Reverend Edgar came when the United States was about to attack Iraq. And the Methodist pastor, Robert Edgar, said, instead of preemptive strike, we must have preemptive love. Love must come first before we strike anyone. If that were the principle, what would it look like for North Korea to strike love? Or for South Korea to do the same, strike love at the core of the religious imagination? unfortunately, the human imagination is far richer in its idea of war rather than peace. So today, the yearning for peace with justice is strong everywhere as it should be. But nowhere is peace so strongly yearned for than in this place, the Korean Peninsula, the northeast region of the world, and in Asia Pacific. Unfortunately, this is the theater of war that has not ended, one held only in tension by an armistice agreement. I can only imagine what is being said on loudspeaker this morning on the celebration of the candlelight revolution. I can only imagine because I'm not there, but I'm sure that it is about the yearning for peace. And I am sure that yearning is for a peace treaty to be enacted between the two Koreas and the United States to conclude a war that has taken too much toll on human lives and too much time wasted that would have otherwise been in the building of trust and confidence, friendship and harmony among the peoples. If you allow me to say, may I end my presentation saying that the interfaith dialogue for environment, unification of Korea and peace building that was held last week, in which some of you were part of, and I see the Reverend Sangwon Park there. I'd like to quote what the statement said, and I was read in Paju. It said, in order for religion to contribute to peace, it is important to create a culture of mutual respect and understanding through sustainable meetings and dialogue. The statement ended that paragraph by saying, making peace means maintaining dialogue. Conversation is not only a means, but a value in itself. Of all the conversations, spiritual-based conversations are the most fruitful ones. The goal is to make toward peace, is to move toward peace through dialogue. It takes true love, preemptive love. It takes true love to talk. And it takes spiritual growth of our minds to do that, unquote. I want to say amen to that.
저는 아멘이라고 말하고 싶습니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. 감사합니다.
감사합니다.
Thank you for having me here, and I'm sorry to take more time of your precious gathering.
예, 오늘 이렇게 저를 다시 한번 초대해 주셔서 감사합니다. I think we're going to take one questions maybe.
Oh, yes, yes.
질문 하나 정도 받을 수 있다고 합니다. 혹시 질문 하나 정도, 질문이나 혹은 의견 있으시면은 한 분 정도 받겠습니다. 네, 현상호 교무님.
한국에 대한 어떤 인연이 어디서부터 시작되셨는지, 본인께서 한국을 이렇게 찾아오셔가지고 항상 이제 그 고성이랑 다 가보셨더라고요. 그래서 평화운동을 한국 남한 사회에서 시작했던 그 배경이 궁금한.
That's a very good question. Thank you for asking. Yes. My first trip to Korea was 1984. I have been to Korea possibly 25 times since. I was a student activist in the Philippines. And something that you may not know is that the student activists in Korea came to train in the Philippines. It was the same time when the president of the Philippines was Ferdinand Marcos, and I believe the 80s that should be Chonduwa, Park Kyung-hee. And so I've been here, I have attended demonstrations here. I can even sing the song. Yes. La 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 la. But yeah. So it is a deep longing. My participation in the Korean struggle for human rights and for justice and for peace spans that long time. In 1987, I was hosted by President Kim Dae-jung. He was not yet president then. It's very important because it was October 8 and it was my birthday, and I was in the house of Kim Dae-jung 2 months after he came back from exile. My deep friendship with many Korean people have taught me lessons about Minju, Minjuk, Minjung. The importance of a people to assert peoplehood and nationhood and self-determination. Because of my work with the United Nations, the World Food Program of North Korea invited me to go to Pyongyang in 1999. So I have seen the two Koreas with my own eyes. The United Methodist Building in New York, which is in front of the United Nations, was the venue of the first ever meeting of North Korean Christians and South Korean Christians. In 1997, the ambassador of South Korea spoke to the group. The ambassador of North Korea spoke to the group, as long as they cannot be seen together in the same room. Otherwise, it would have been a violation of national security of Korea, of South Korea, and national security of North Korea. The thing I wanted to say is religious groups have been hosting the meeting of North Korean and South Korean peoples on what is called track to diplomacy, silent dialogue. Last week, Christians from North Korea and South Korea met again in Bangkok. I was supposed to be there, but because I'm teaching at Kyunghee University, I could not go. But this is 29 years of annual meeting with the knowledge of Korean government, North and South. So 3 years ago, I am very thankful to the Korean people for including me as one, as I think the Reverend Duyon Park said, as one of 12 people that was recognized for a foreigner who has contributed to the democratization of the Korean Peninsula.
Thank you very much.